Hi, very warm welcome to Dee Waddell. You're the Global Managing Director for Travel and Transportation at IBM. Thank you so much for joining us for our last session here on PhocusWire Pulse today, Dee.
Well, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
I was just reminded in that last session, I did lose my car keys yesterday. So that technology couldn't come soon enough, I must say. So, Dee, you and I spoke the World Aviation Festival in September 2019. Months before any of us knew what was about to hit us. I think just first of all, it'd be useful to know, Dee, I mean, what has IBM seen over the course of last year and coming into the first few months of this year with regards to broadly security threats, various things that have been going on?
Yeah, it was interesting. Our conversation at the World Aviation Forum was really about retail and revenue growth, and even how to empower employees and so forth in a pre-COVID world. Clearly now it has shifted with the pandemic, and you're starting to see some differentiating companies come out. And I think one of the key things that we're seeing is airlines and airports and travel-related companies who are focused on digital transformation in their areas may have slightly shifted their focus, whether it be automating with AI in the call center or other pieces. So it's not necessarily top line revenue like we've seen before, but repositioning, maximizing revenue in what they have. But you're seeing airlines differentiate themselves by actually investing and driving ways to get ahead when the pandemic, when we get out of this pandemic. So I think that's one key piece from an overall travel perspective. Now on security, sadly, we've had several pretty high-profile incidents. You've seen a growth in state actors. You've seen a pretty significant growth just in targeted attacks, for instance, like airports that have had some critical infrastructure. And the fact is, in travel and transportation, these are core industries that move people and move goods. And when you have contention in the world and challenges of trying to get ahead competitively, there are going to be security issues. But still, with our research, the travel and transportation space is still one of the top 3 industries targeted for these attacks, and it is significant. We've seen them in the shipping, we've seen it in the airlines, we've seen it in airports, and the cost of these is staggering. And my concern is that companies in this space are just not quite ready for these attacks, or doing it, they're not providing their security services in a consistent way. They're doing it point by point, and we can go into some of those details as well.
Has the pandemic, I said perhaps rather confidently in my introduction that it hasn't made lots of hackers just sit back a while. I wonder if the pandemic has, in fact, actually increased the level of attacks. Has there been an increase in the attempts, successful or otherwise, that you've seen or know about?
Well, many of these, we don't always see what happens day to day, right? And so the fact is we know that this is a growing concern. We know that our industry is one of the top attacked industries. Particularly based on the level of services and what I mentioned earlier on what we provide. And companies need to address this. Now there's a balance here. How do you address this? Make sure you're well protected and doing everything you can while still driving a business. I mean, look, we're just trying to survive in many respects. I mean, the amount of jobs lost in the travel and tourism space is just staggering, and the dollars that countries, in terms of the overall tourism aspect of their economy, is almost, almost down the drain. So how do you recover this quickly? But look, the fact is it's growing. If you're not looking at this and trying to then optimize, you're not in the game.
What would you say, Dee, then, what are the customer impacts, and or opportunities to elevate security in the kind of the overall traveler experience then?
Well, look, there are many aspects to security, and I thought one of the ones we could talk about today is the work that we're doing around our digital health pass, and how that plays in, because oftentimes security isn't seen to a traveler, right? I mean, the back-end systems, how do you encrypt, how do you protect systems, may be not as transparent to the actual client experience, or the customer or the traveler experience. But I think what's happening is you're starting to see a pretty significant change. Now, interesting, at PhocusWire here a couple of years ago when we talked about blockchain, we talked about how there was the identity management aspect coming out, where this shift of really trying to empower the traveler to have control and access of their own data, and then share that as they seem, rather than having like an airline house that information on their service, on their servers and systems. And blockchain really enables that type of what we call a self-sovereign approach to this, where it's your data. And while I recognize there's a lot of people scared about their own data, especially as you get into health information and tests and vaccinations and so forth. But the good news is these digital technologies really empower the people with the technology, that they own their own, that it's not shared unless you consent to sharing that. So I think people need to understand that as well. But that's a key part of this the traveler journey.
What would you say, Dee, are what are the technological developments coming down the road to alleviate the threat? So you referenced blockchain. You've spoken to us about it before. We had a session earlier. I mean, are there any other kind of, either it's technologies or processes that are being developed to just kind of heighten the systems that are in place to kind of battle these security issues?
Well, there's a couple of angles. Let me start with kind of the IT approach. So if we have some key IT listeners out there, I think one of the core things that we're seeing is, how do you integrate security in a consistent fashion for whenever you make any changes to your systems, and then making sure that the policies are broad and able to be consistently applied. So in our industry, and we here at IBM, we talk about this hybrid cloud. And what this means is you have a very a diverse set of systems. So if you're a CIO at an airline, you have mainframes, you have mid-range, you have cloud, you have on-premise x86, whatever. So you have a plethora of systems. But the challenge is how do you manage security in a consistent, cohesive way across all those systems? So I think that's one angle, that there are new approaches coming out, especially leveraging what we call containerization and how I can consistently apply these pieces. This is what we mean by the hybrid cloud. You can embed that in. Mm-hmm. That's the IT angle. Now, if I go to the business aspect of this, what I see is this ability to tap into like these, so what we're seeing around, like in New York with the Excelsior Pass, and you're seeing governments start to really say, hey, I need to be able to validate digitally credentials. So for instance, Kevin, if you go into like a CVS here in the US and you say, I get my vaccination, or you do a test that I'm not positive, then that should be digitally put into your wallet that only you have access to, that then you can apply, whether it be to a grocery store, a movie theater, an airport, an airline, and be able to use that across. So I think one of the things we're seeing on the business side is that aspect of tapping into these, whether it be government or broader coalition-based networks. But the key thing is this coalition. And we're seeing airlines must be part of this coalition, whether it be the Excelsior Pass. I know the European Union just came up with their COVID digital certificate. But how do I bring those in and really use them in the customer journey is the challenge for airlines and airports.
We talked about what's coming down the road in terms of techniques to protect. What's coming down the road in terms of techniques that are being used to launch attacks? There is this, you hear security people say before, you're always one step behind what the hackers are capable of. So what are they capable of that we are still to kind of grapple?
Well, clearly, when you have state actors and private actors getting into this, their innovation is moving very quick. But I think the one thing that we continue to see that is broad in both IT and business domains is the fact that they exploit users, whether it be phishing type emails. I mean, literally, an organization can be one click away from an employee that just mistakenly clicks on something that has access, broad access into various systems within the company. So, I mean, that training of individuals, that understanding that email that you just got, that text, and we're seeing it on text and other mechanisms that we use that can compromise. So I think that's one big one. We've seen ransomware continue to be a challenge. So I don't think there's new categories per se, but they're getting very good at exploiting some of these other ways of getting the data. Now, we have seen a little bit about encryption being able to block some of these on a broader basis. And we're seeing even different levels of encryption, and you'll hear about quantum computers and the requirements to be able to break the current encryption schemes, as well as then what are the future type pieces as well. But look, these actors are very engaged. They're finding ways to exploit individuals as well as the companies too.
Yeah. So, I mean, we referenced COVID at the beginning there. I mean, prioritizing security, if you think of it as an overarching term, I mean, everyone says it's important, but as you said yourself at the beginning, everyone wants to just get up and run again. Operationally, the industry has got so much work to do, from mothballing aircraft to put them back in the sky, reopening hotels. How do you kind of prioritize those efforts against the equally important ones of maintaining your system security?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'll even say that every board is dealing with this. And it usually is at the board level because it's a risk management issue. What are my risks? What type of resources do I allocate to that risk, right? That's a board decision in close discussions with the executive committee and the CEOs and so forth. However, what we are seeing is, as boards look at this, just trusting your own internal people to say that I've covered my own bases is not enough. Just like on the finance side, we don't trust public companies saying, these are my financials. We have auditors who are third parties that come in and audit the financial results.
Yep.
What we're seeing is a trend to have credible third-party service providers. And there's, of course, IBM is one, but there are others out there that you can use that really then specialize in the third-party auditing of your security. And I think that's a really critical piece for particularly the airlines, as well as then the other segments in travel and even transportation, is making sure that it's not just the internal, but the boards have seen that, oh, wow, my internal people are saying this, it's the CISO and so forth, but also they can validate it based on the best in the industry and a third-party credential, kind of a credentialed approach to this. So I think it brings trust to the whole process, which is a critical aspect, because we're dealing with things we don't know. And to say, what is the right level of investment? Yeah, it's easy to go say, yeah, well, the general investment for security in travel is X. But then all of a sudden I see all of these things happening at airports. I see it at airlines. I see it at transportation companies. They're still getting hit. So what is the right level? How do we do that? I think the board would be well served by making sure they've got an auditing function for this area.
Where is the biggest vulnerability? Is it around a brand's own systems and their data security, or is it just the movement of people and their own perhaps relaxed attitude to their own security?
Yeah, I'll keep going back to its people. And so, for instance, it's if you have access to certain areas of systems and you're seeing, perhaps you even get, if you're in a larger company, you're getting, hey, what are the access rights you have for certain applications and so forth. And they're being very good about that. We used to just have automated server-based passwords and login, where we don't do that generally anymore. We make sure that those are tied up, that you can't get in, and it's based on the individual or credentials. You're seeing other third-party ways of credentialing, whether it be through automated callbacks or texts where you have to do an additional level of authentication. But look, so that is one big area. But again, I also think that just phishing people, finding ways to mimic them, getting in, we're just looking at my own. I mean, you even got like home type, deed type phishing schemes where people can actually get in, imitate you, and transfer your house, the deed of your house. So it's a little bit scary just on a consumer perspective. But the fact is, you've got to be cognizant of these pieces, what people are doing. And again, I go back to the people aspect, which is most concerning for security.
You referenced health passes a little while ago, Dee. I mean, standards around security technology, especially with regards to health issues, health passes, should there be some kind of central organizing body to oversee the development of standards, or is that something that takes place kind of fairly piecemeal, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's going to emerge in different ways. And as I mentioned before, I do think these coalition approaches. So I know the World Travel and Tourism Council, which I'm fortunate to be a part of the executive committee. We've been talking about the seamless traveler journey. We've got IATA, who's putting in place their pieces. You've got relatively broader systems providers that are providing access in. But look, it all goes around what aspects are they going to play in, and the real area that I'm seeing is around verifiers that need to be able to get access to all of these different systems depending on where the government is in the world. So if you are in Europe and you now have this new COVID digital credential, I need to be able to put that in my wallet to be able to then use that throughout Europe. Now the US, maybe the Excelsior Pass in New York, we'll have to see how it goes. Maybe it's an independent lab. So I go to CVS or I go to some other place to get my test. I need to take that certificate into my wallet to be able to use that. So I may have both. And I need to be able to show that to an airline, maybe in Europe or others, whether it be the local one. See, you can see the complexity already. What I'm seeing is that's going to be the opportunity for companies. And this is why we've tried to stay focused on the integrating point and making sure that we're interoperable. So whether it's the EU digital certificate, whether that would be optimizing, we have our IBM Watson Health that is doing a great job of trying to aggregate and bringing some of the testing in, that part of our platform that then we can use into whether it be an airline mobile app or other pieces. But that's really then the aspect that we're going to be bringing in. But that is a real interoperability is a big issue. And I think we've got a great solution. I think we're the leading solution in the integration perspective. We continue to work with airlines, health providers, and a whole plethora of the network.
So last question then, right back to the beginning, you said travel is one of the top 3 industry sectors that has so many vulnerabilities. I mean, first of all, what are the other 2 for those people that don't know? And what are some of those other sectors doing differently from travel to kind of face the similar problems that travel does face?
Yeah, it's a great question. And to be clear, those are the targeted industries. So not necessarily those with the most vulnerabilities. It's the ones that are targeted, to be clear. So as I have it in our latest survey, we've got financial services, clearly. The other is retail. And how do I then mimic that? And then there, go down, and I'm just looking at it, government, media, and so forth. But the travel and transportation sector is a significant one. And again, because you're moving people and goods. And how do I disrupt that? How do I gain access to some of the technology in those areas? And I think that's a key piece. But look, I still think, for instance, like financial services, we've talked about, what percent of systems have actually moved to a cloud, a true public type cloud. And financial services is relatively low because of the security requirements. And what we've seen is cloud continues to be an area of concern because there's no perimeter. It's the internet. So how do you create these industry clouds? And you'll hear these terms. We as IBM are one of the leaders in this space, but they're creating specific industry clouds that are creating the environment that protects that. And I'm seeing slowly that become in travel and transportation as well. So for instance, we've got our IBM Travel Cloud platform, which very specifically brings those components that is in a secure way that we can make sure that it operates in that space. But that's what I'm seeing in others as well, like telecom. I'm seeing this as well. We offer our telecom cloud, our financial services cloud, and I'm seeing that as a specific response to not just let's all go to the public cloud, because there still is concerns there. But on the same token, you can mitigate them. But many of this is because we don't configure things in the cloud correctly. So how do you make sure that as you move to that, you can leverage some of the aspects, scale, the wonderful things of cloud, but not get exposed to some of those security risks?
So some busy times ahead, maybe some hope ahead that collectively as an industry we can figure out how to keep on top of these things. Thank you so much, Dee Waddell from IBM, for joining us again. We appreciate your time. That's it for the last session. Standing by for Pete Como. Thank you.